Hello, I'm Alfred Lambremont Weber, and I have the great privilege today of being with a colleague, a researcher, and who is coming to me from um, Australia, Mary Rodwell, who's the founder and director of ACERN. Mary, welcome.
Alfred, it's an absolute pleasure. It's good to talk with you again.
Now, where exactly in Australia are you now? Because I know that formerly you were in Perth.
Yes, last year I moved to Queensland, so I'm actually north of Brisbane, which is a beautiful spot, just not quite semi-tropical, but it's really beautiful here. And Agnes Water is a little quiet place, which has its own UFO hotspot title as well.
Oh, good. Well, I asked you if you would be so kind to come on Exopolitics TV when we spoke at two different conferences this past summer, the ESETI conference at Mount Adams, and then the IIIHS conference. And it was your presentation at ESETI that really I thought was remarkable because it greatly broadened my horizon about one species of extraterrestrials that we know as the Greys. And exopolitics, as we know, is the science of relations among extraterrestrial or intelligent civilizations in the multiverse, one being the Greys and the other being us humans. And the particular case, well, there were two, but I think one just to start with was the case of Suzanne Hansen, who will be speaking with us later, who is the founder and director of UFO New Zealand. And I'll just summarize it quickly, but then we can go in through it. Where briefly, if I understand the facts correctly, she was taken aboard a gray craft and introduced to her son before he was conceived. And then she was married, and once he was conceived, she was taken up again, and his soul was inserted into her womb and the fetus, and certain instructions as to his life or his destiny were communicated to her. Correct me if I don't have the details right, but I found this extraordinary and very mind-expanding for many different reasons, ranging from just the nature of the extraterrestrials, but also the nature of the soul. And I wondered if you, as a groundbreaking researcher in this area, and dealing with the Greys as you do, who, as you know, have gotten a lot of sort of negative projections, if you could relate the background of this case and how you approached it as a researcher, and ultimately as a colleague of Suzanne Hansen's.
Certainly, Alfred. What Suzanne had conveyed was that she needed to come and see me. She had the strong desire to explore new information, and she gets a kind of inkling of that through her connection to these intelligences. And although Suzanne has a great deal of conscious memory, for a long time she was quite satisfied with that. But there came a point where she got this strong feeling that she needed to explore in more detail. So she flew over from New Zealand. We initially worked for about 5 days doing 2 regressions a day. And this particular one, she said, it's like I can't have, I'm not getting any idea of what kind of focus I should have for this regression. Normally she would have a particular experience in mind. So we went in very open-ended. And this was when she described being a small child, being told that she was going to be introduced to someone very special. And she even described, and this gives a lot of the experiences, in my mind, a great deal of integrity, is almost skipping along the curved corridor with the little Zeta or grey being in front of her, and she said she felt his amusement, which is really important to add that for those that are not so fearful, they do get from a lot of these so-called expressionless, emotionless greys, which is not the case. It's usually their emotions are not shown on their face, but actually are telepathic in the sense that you will get the sense of their feeling and emotion through a telepathic transfer. And so she's taken into this small room where she's told to meet, that she's going to meet someone special, and she's expecting to meet another being of some kind, or another human. And what she's then exposed to is this ball of light, which she has no understanding of what it is, other than she's being told that this is someone she is going to get to know and love, and ultimately he will become her son. Now, at an 8-year-old level, that must have been extremely strange to and very hard to understand. And she describes trying to entertain this ball of light or play with it because she didn't quite know what to do, to try and interact until she felt it thinking at her, as she puts it. And this creates a whole range of emotions and feelings which, actually confuse her, but also reassure her on some level. She then is told that she's going to be introduced progressively to this ball of light, who will ultimately become her son. A huge concept.
Question of free will, or what we call in the law, informed consent. And I know that there are various layers of informed consent. One, I've heard anecdotally, through regression, I found out that prior to coming into this life, I consented to that abduction. So there was informed consent at an interlife level. And I'm just asking you, as a researcher in this extraordinary area, what you have found with regard to informed consent, because that seems to be one of the chief complaints of alien abductees.
Absolutely, and it's one that for me, with clients coming to me with trauma, and feeling quite understandably victimized by these beings coming and taking them, as they believe, against their consent. Within the regression, one of the questions I ask, and sometimes, believe it or not, it's asked by the client themselves in that space, is, have you, on any level, consented to this experience? And I'm talking about, any level. And every time the answer comes back, yes, but it was before I came here. And they will describe themselves being a ball of light. I remember one young lady, because she felt so connected to the extraterrestrials, she saw herself as a dual consciousness. And she'd had an extremely difficult human experience with these beings. And I said to her the same question. She said, yes, but in a way, she said, what I have to tell you is this: my extraterrestrial side is fine with it, but my human side really struggles, she said, with what happened. She said, because I didn't realize it was going to be so difficult. And one of the things that Tracy told me about her own understanding on this topic was that she became very compassionate towards the beings as she realized that we can learn so much from them. And she said, I was fearful of these experiences. It was only when I seemed to be the only one having them, and she didn't know what was going on or why. But she said there's always been an equal exchange, and I helped them achieve their genetic goals, and in return, my healing and
Mary? Yes, we're with Mary Rodwell, founder and director of ACERN, who's in Queensland, Australia, and we're having to continue this interview via international phone line because it looks like we've had some technical difficulties with our video line, so we beg the audience indulgence. But Mary, you were right at the point of talking about some of the remarkable experiences that Suzanne Hansen had when she went into a room on a gray extraterrestrial craft and experienced the ball of light, who she was told as an 8-year-old child, if I recall, that would be a being who would be very close to her in her future. Have I summarized that correctly?
Yes, Alfred, that's exactly it. And at the time, we were both quite astounded by the material, and this was something totally unexpected. It wasn't as though we had any idea at the start of this particular regression what to expect. And it was quite fascinating that, given the fact that Suzanne was also told that this would continue now until her son was born, and it was basically left like that she felt really quite profoundly sad when this ball of light was finally moved again from the room, and she was taken by the Grey again home and taken, that experience was complete. But a few months later, Suzanne rang me up and said that she needed to see me again, that they told her that she needed to come and get more information, and she had no idea again what this was going to be about. We had no particular experience we were choosing to explore. Again, she had to keep a very open mandate. So imagine it was quite amazing again that she's seeing herself this time fully pregnant, due, she said, to having her baby within a few days, a difficult pregnancy, and she's being helped along the corridor by the Greys again into a room where she's laid down. And what was fascinating was then she was reminded of her interactions with the ball of light through her life right up to this point, which again, when she was reminded of it, was very, very emotional and very profound. And interestingly, in the regression itself, her voice changed. And normally in regression, your voice anyway usually goes a lot quieter when you're in hypnosis, but this was almost like slow motion. Her voice was almost like slow motion. And she was describing her whole body frequency changing into, she was being assisted to go to another level of frequency, if you like. And this long, drawn-out way of speaking was demonstrating her revisiting that. And then she describes some beings coming in with the ball of light, and this being placed over her abdomen. And the process of melding actually began. And she described this and how she felt. It was extremely profound in this whole experience, and something that was completely outside of anything I'd ever been witness to. And, this is very, very amazing information showing literally the moment when the soul enters the physical vehicle, which was quite incredible. And then being told more about his life on this planet. She was even told that he was going to be born late, which in fact he was, and I'm sure Suzanne can explain that in more detail. But for me, what this was, the profound side of this was showing that these beings, these intelligences, are actually working at the level of soul, which I know is going to be extremely difficult for many people to appreciate or want to appreciate, because there's a great deal of negativity, particularly around the Zetas or the Greys. And that is not what I'm finding with my research. I mean, more evidence of the level of soul, I can give two other instances of this. One was a young lady that told me that she was experiencing herself as a Zeta Grey on the craft, acting, if you like, in another form as a kind of scientist. And yet this was in a present life where she was in human form. So I said I couldn't quite work out why she was talking about being in another form that wasn't human and working on the craft. And then I said, well, where's your human body? And she said, oh, it's over there, almost like it was sort of hanging up on a hook waiting for her to reanimate it. And she described, and I said, well, how do you get back to your human form? And she describes the ball of light leaving the extraterrestrial form, if you like, biological body, and going back into a human form and reanimating it. Now, that I didn't fully understand, and this was many years ago. She described this to me, and it was quite, to me, it was an anomaly in the sense I hadn't come across this before. And yet, interestingly, only a few years ago, a young man he was 15 years old, and he was describing an interaction with the grey beings. And he was saying that with the beings, suddenly he saw two orbs of light. And I said, well, you know, what are these orbs of light? And he said, they're Granddad and my uncle. And he described that he recognized them as being people he knew that had died and passed on. And yet they were there with these beings. And I said, what are they doing there? And he said, oh, they're there so that I won't be frightened. They're there to let me know it's okay. And when he described the beings leaving from that experience and going back onto the craft, he also described that the orbs of light, which he describes as the soul of his grandfather, and I think it was another family member, actually going onto the craft with the beings. Now, what do we do with all of that? This, to me, is suggesting that not only do these beings interact in those dimensions that we call the level of soul, but also are working in a very tangible way with them, even though they're disembodied, as we would see them, with no physical vehicle. And I think this takes this to a whole new level of understanding these different intelligences and what ultimately does this say to us in understanding ourselves and our multidimensional nature.
Right. Well, you know, even if we, just not to go to the direction of the religious model, but even if we take some of the other scientific-based models of the afterlife, if we take near-death experiences or some of the regression research of someone like Dr. Michael Newton, for example, you have the archetype of tunnels of light. There's a tunnel of light, and then there's a portal or a dimensional portal, and then the soul passes through to, quote, the spiritual dimension. There's sort of a portal, and the soul passes through to what we would call the interlife or the afterlife. And this has a whole other suggestion, because there is no portal to the interlife or the afterlife. There's sort of a journey to a gray extraterrestrial ship. Have you pondered some of these issues?
Oh, and certainly. I think that what I'd like to add with that is that because I think it's absolutely relevant, and I'm not sure how to interpret it other than this way, is that often when I've spoken within the regression where, the person is exploring from that deeper level of awareness, many of them have gone to the point before they've incarnated as a human and seen themselves as a ball of light, and actually explaining to me that they've incarnated into this form, and they have a mandate, if you like. They have chosen to incarnate in human form, but they will say that they were in that other existence as the ball of light, relating to experiences as a non-human, in other words, as what we would call an extraterrestrial from another realm of the galaxy, and relating the connection they have to that other species, and that they will say that they've incarnated as human this time to assist with the process of human evolution and the expansion of human consciousness.
Right. And here, gathering the cases that you have mentioned, and these are actual empirical cases, it would seem that the grays are carrying out functions that in a traditional religious context are attributed to divinity. That is, the direct sort of handling of the fate of souls or the direction of souls, and that the gray spaceship would be akin to what we would call heaven in a religious context. Have those concepts come up for you?
Certainly, and it's a difficult one because I came from a perspective. As a child, I was brought up as a Catholic, and of course, seeing it from that perspective. But now seeing it from the perspective that, like Dr. Michael Newton, a lot of my work is not just with the experiences with extraterrestrial, these advanced intelligences, but also to past lives as well. And in between lives, in the exact the same way, and I'm trying to marry that with what I'm hearing from my clients that are going into these going into this understanding, and trying to work out a new way of understanding maybe what we know about ourselves as transiting into these other realms in a different form. And that's what it sort of suggests to me, is that we work through our own lens, don't we, to understand, what we would say the spirit or the soul. And it suggests to me that the vehicle of the soul seems to, it's at least suggesting that is this ball of light, this energy, and this, is the vehicle for working in other realms. And certainly the Zetas or the Greys seem to understand how that works, or the process, or how to interact in that way with these other realms. They seem to have an understanding of what that means far greater than we do in our limited way of understanding our reality.
Right. What have you come to understand about what the Greys are? What is their source and origin? What is their mission? What is their intent?
I think Suzanne will be able to give you a lot more detail here, but what I'm understanding is there are many, many different forms of what we call the Greys, and all of them have particular roles to play. Some, I think, are literally have the job, if you like, to assist with genetic information. In other words, they are there to, take people onto the craft, do a medical exam. Some are healing procedures, which they work with other intelligences. Some of them may be humanoids. Some of them may be what we call the manta, or insect-like being. There may be 2 or 3 different species working together with different forms of hybrids. And, the Greys, we bunch them all together and we think they're all the same when they're not. All have different roles to play, and it seems to be a cooperation between various cosmic or interdimensional intelligences, and they all have certain expertise, if you like, within their mandate. And just like we do have on this planet, we have people that, deliver the post. We have people who, doctors who are there for health, etc., etc. It seems that certain species or certain types of Grey have different roles to play. And given that doesn't mean that they're all, like many people believe, a robotic individual. In fact, Suzanne will talk about the fact what they actually do to play and to have, what they do in terms of how they see us and how they understand their own, if you like, existence. And for many of them, what Suzanne recognizes is a deep sense of compassion, a deep sense of love of, what they are not only doing, but for those that they're interacting with. And many of my clients, when they are having a procedure done and they are able to tap into the telepathic transfer of information, will get a real sense that they're being shown why, they're being shown the importance of what they're doing, they are shown deep compassion, and one of these was shown to that made, in fact, Suzanne extremely teary, was because of her very difficult childhood, that she was being taken up onto the craft, even as a baby and a small child, and put into what she called a special healing cradle that was actually had certain light frequencies that rebalanced her after the trauma that she had within her own childhood, which actually made her very tearful when she saw the love and compassion that she's being treated to on board craft, which was so far above what she was experiencing in her human life with her human family, that it was extremely profound. And even with little ways of them showing how much they cared for her, she describes being taken down home again through one experience as a child where she's being taught to use her mind, and the being demonstrates as he's taking her down back home that he puts what she calls an etheric arm around her to show her that he's keeping an eye on her and keeping her safe, and she's wanting to show off as this little child and show him how clever she is, and she mentally projects the same thing around him. In other words, an etheric arm around him to show him that she's learned this too, and that how much she appreciates what he's showing her. These are really incredible examples of the detail of how this interaction on this level is a very deep and profound one with these beings.
Now, there's so many questions that one can ask. One key question is this. In the field of abductees, and we know from at least some of the, for example, the Roper poll, the 2002 Roper poll, 2% of the American adult population self-describe themselves as having experienced an alien abduction, quote, end of quote. So that could be up somewhere between 4 and 6 million people. Mm-hmm. In the classic abduction literature, it's filled with trauma, and individuals who have been so traumatized and memories of trauma and having been treated during abductions in a traumatic and uncaring way. And how do you square those memories and that experience with what you found in the cases of Suzanne Hansen and the other cases that you just mentioned?
What I've discovered is a percentage of those with the abduction contact experience, which in all my cases of 1,600 now, or more than that now, probably is about 30% of the total. For the majority of those that have encounters, it isn't a traumatic experience. In fact, it's completely the opposite to that. But for those that have had traumatic encounters, what I've discovered is what they're fearful of often isn't what actually happened, or it's because they haven't understood fully what's happened. And when you explore it with them, and it may be that it's been a medical procedure, and what I've discovered is that if you can take them into that experience again, and they can not only, yes, certainly they need to see what they experienced, but also get understanding of what that experience was about. And when they're in that space, they can get the information that helps them understand what that procedure was about, and if it was painful or the reasons for it. And what is interesting is that it seems like on their hard drive, as I call it, or their subconscious, the answers and the understanding is waiting for them if you can ask the right questions. Many, I think, researchers don't work this way. They will look at the overview in a clinical way and not go for what the person most needs is understanding of why. Why are they doing this? What's this about? Why me? All those kinds of questions. In fact, you can help them to get answers to this. And for many of my clients, what they discover is that the medical exam is exactly what it is, that they're being looked at for pollution, for all sorts of problems that we have on this planet due to, the food that we eat, the pollution generally on the planet itself. But also sometimes there is enormous amount of healing being done that they don't understand. They may just experience this strange contraption above them or apparatus that is doing something really strange to them. But if you can get them to ask why or what that is, many times it's actually, they'll discover it's some kind of form of healing that's being performed on them. And I will say to them, does this make sense to you? And they will say, yes, it does, even though it confronts them because they don't expect that to be part of their experience. They're expecting something really awful to be going on. And yet there's always seems to be an understanding of what exactly happening.
Once again, we apologize for these technical interruptions. I do not know what the cause is, but they have occurred both on Skype and on our phone and on our recorder. So there's such a convergence that I believe that the probabilities are of some intervention. I'm not sure. I wouldn't say that it's gray. It's more probably human.
Yes.
So we have just a minute or two left, and I wondered if you could, in that minute or two, number one, leave our listeners with the most profound insight that you have from your research. Are you optimistic about our future, or do you believe that we're headed for a cataclysm and an extinction? I know that that's a difficult question, but I will just put it in your lap.
I am very optimistic because I don't believe all these amazing souls that choose to be born at this moment in time are being born for something that ultimately has, unless it's for an amazing transformation of the human species. I can't believe all these amazing souls would be born right now if it was going to be a waste of time. So I can only believe, because they are being born, that we are in for an amazing transformation of human consciousness and awareness, because otherwise I don't see any point to them actually incarnating right now. And that includes myself, because I'm sure I wouldn't want to be here if all my hard work was going to be a waste of time. So from a personal and from a greater level of my research, I am very hopeful that we as a human species are really at the cusp of something really magnificent.
Thank you. And Mary, if our listeners want to follow up and really find out more about you and your research, where can they do that?
My website is the best one, the CERN website, which is cern.com.au, or just type in my name and that will take them to the website. Oh,
excellent. I really want to thank you for being with us today, and I apologize for these technical difficulties, and I hope that you will join us again as this story unfolds.
It would be an absolute pleasure, Alfred, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Certainly. We've been with Mary Rodwell, founder and director of CERN. This is Alfred Lambremont Weber for ExopoliticsTV. Thank you.